Would you keep Eddie Johnson and Janice Jackson?
I've publicly said that I would not keep Superintendent Johnson.
Why not?
I think that we need stronger leadership in the police department, and I'm concerned that he testified in court that there was no such thing as a code of silence in the police department.
So he needs to go. Is he part of that code of silence? Is he, I mean, what did that say about him?
He refused to acknowledge that there was a code of silence in the police department.
And that tells you what?
I don't think that's an honest statement.
So how would you characterize his tenure? Is he just a go-along, get-along, likable guy, or what's wrong with his tenure? And the mayor reached down and got him. He didn't even apply. How do you feel that how he's done?
I think it's very important that police be accountable for their conduct. And if you won't even acknowledge that there's a code of silence in the police department, how can you possibly do that? You know, let me talk a little bit about the Laquan McDonald case. I was approached by a neighborhood journalist who told me about this incident. He asked me for the autopsy report. It turns out that the state's attorney had asked for an extra toxicology screen for the autopsy and delayed, I think, a deliberate tactic to delay the publication of the autopsy. When the autopsy report was available and the toxicology screenings were complete, it showed that Laquan McDonald was shot 16 times and that many of those shots were in the back. And that information provided a foundation, a framework for the community activists who work so hard to keep this issue on the public attention, on the radar screen. You know, we're deeply indebted to them for that good work. And then, of course, the videotape comes out the day before Thanksgiving in 2015, showing that the narrative, the police narrative, from the bottom to the top, was false. It was not true that Laquan McDonald was taking aggressive action toward the police officers when he was shot. He was walking away or stumbling away, and he was shot in the back. Now, I'm grateful that Jason Van Dyke was found guilty of his murder, but he's the first police officer in 50 years to be found guilty of murder. And I don't think he's the first officer in 50 years to have murdered one of our citizens. And we have to hold our officers accountable for their bad behavior. And we can't allow police officers to condone and cover up that bad behavior, which is the subject of the trial of 3 of the other officers who were on the scene or came to the scene that day.
Okay, but what does that have to do with Eddie Johnson?
I think it's important for the superintendent of police to acknowledge the misconduct and the bad acts of police officers. And if you start out by saying basically there's no code of silence and we have never condoned or covered up bad police behavior, I don't think that's a characteristic of an effective leader. And I think it's really important. I think it's really important for police officers to understand that it's not their obligation, it's not their duty to cover up for fellow officers when they behave badly.
And he said that where? In
court.
In deposition or in open court?
I think it was in open court. It may have been in a deposition.